as a sex worker and as a coach now, men are dangling the carrot of commitment and women are dangling the carrot of sexuality. And the truth is, women's sexuality is very powerful. When it comes to infidelity, what I see a lot is men cheat to stay in the relationship and women cheat to get out of it. And what I saw also behind closed doors with men.
As a former high-end sex worker and now certified sexologist, please help every single woman wrap their heads around why. Whether the men were single or in a relationship, what on earth were they coming to you for that they couldn't get at home?
What I found is, men would come to me thinking that they just wanted to get their rocks off, right? And what would be revealed pretty quickly was that they weren't being seen or acknowledged or witnessed for their full selves or heard at home or in their private lives. So they would come wanting the experience of the whore and then reconciling that when they see my humanity, and it would kind of be like a Madonna-Whore merger experience, which was interesting. And they would end up sharing things with me that they would never tell a spouse, a partner, a best friend, a conventional therapist. And I just found that fascinating. And for men in particular, so much of that is rooted in performance, right? And being strong all the time and wanting to have sex all the time and being masculine and being stoic and providing. And there was no flexibility there whatsoever. And what I saw also behind closed doors with men, it's, there was so much paradox, which I thought was fascinating. Like, there were men that were so deeply in love with their wives and would speak about them, but their wives weren't having sex with them. And they would try to bring it up. They would even be going to therapy, and they were just being met with rejection across the board, right? And rejection there for a man is the equivalent of women's emotions being totally rejected and minimized. So, as much as we try to reduce sex to it's just sex and get over it, it's a huge part of how we communicate. It's another language, right?
Mm-hmm. So when you even said about the guys sitting there telling you that they love their wives, help me understand that even deeper, because there's so much cognitive dissonance to me between someone saying, I love you, I care about you, I would literally put my life on the line for you, but I'm still going to go behind your back and sleep with another woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they didn't have the lexicon and the language around being able to communicate with their partners. Most people don't, right? This is the sad fact.
Mm-hmm.
So they might try to proposition their partner and their wife and be met with rejection, not knowing what that rejection might mean to her. Maybe what's she not being seen as? What needs aren't getting met of hers, right?
Yeah, why did she say no?
Yeah, exactly. So then it would become this just lock, this gridlock, this, standoff, right? They would try perhaps conventional therapy, as most couples do, but it is not required of any therapist to undergo sexuality training or sexology training. So less than 14% of therapists are trained in anything to do with sexuality. And if you're talking about intimacy and couples and shame, it all comes down to sexuality. So if you go to a therapist and they're like, yeah, you should have duty sex, or you should not expect to have sex with your partner, and blah, blah, blah. That's their own projections, right? So then the shame just keeps just festering and proliferating and building from there. And there's nowhere for them to go. So what would occur is this kind of silent atrophy where it's like this acceptance of the status quo. This is as good as it gets. So I'm going to keep the cookie cutter relationship over here, and I'm going to go over here to get this need met, right? So what my work is rooted in now is finding ways for men to start telling the truth and communicating and disclosing parts of themselves without blowing up their marriage or without having to go to the sex worker, right? So many of them also fall passively into a relationship. A man's yearning for freedom is the same as a woman's for commitment. Neither of them have anything to do with love. So it's like, if we actually pause for a second and ask before entering a life partnership together, well, what does that look like? What should I know about you? What are your deepest desires? Like, how do you shut down? What scares you? What are your fears? Because that's always how it ends up manifesting, sexually.
I love that you've taken your former career and really developed it into trying to help men and couples. Like, that's such a beautiful transition, and you being able to really articulate where a man's coming from. I'm always trying to receive it with open arms, even if I don't like what you're saying, because my goal really is to understand how men show up, understand how they see things, and then understand what I'm willing to do and what I'm willing not to. So talk to me more about the Madonna and the whore complex, because I think that this is very confusing for a lot of women, where they feel like men are saying you should be nurturing, I want to be taken care of, and I want you to be a fucking wild woman in the bedroom.
Yeah, we have been sold this lie that we have to choose an identity, right? It's like stay in one lane. And so if we trace this back to the Madonna-Whore Complex, women internalize it and men project it. So this comes from the origin of like how a man attaches to his mother in the first few years of his life, right? So we have like the devouring mother, which was like the extremely overprotective mother, and she loves her son very much, but she's also like, that girl with her bra strap showing is bad, or, you know, she's trouble. And there's this over bonding that happens, right? So there's no separation that's able to take place. And the man equates love to his mother, right? So it becomes very, very confusing. And especially as life goes on, is that, you know, the wife becomes the mother herself. It's like, how can I possibly sexually, that's, you know, that's the mother of my children. Like, she's this precious, delicate flower, and I don't want to break her apart. But the analogy I like to use is when we're kids, we play, right? And we think back as adults, we're like, oh, play is like tickling each other and playing hide and seek and laughing. No, it wasn't. Play was like, you're the pink Power Ranger, I'm the blue Power Ranger, you know, you're Lord Voldemort, and I'm the fairy princess. And we take those roles very seriously. It's a way for us to express ourselves in a contained manner, right? But we lose that as we get older. So a way to explore that is to invite someone in your fantasies, in your fantasy realm. So if that never is brought in at the beginning of a relationship, then it just creates a further and further distance.
I've heard guys say, well, she's the mother of my child, therefore I can't do all this kinky shit, so I'm going to go get it elsewhere. That's still very confusing, because it's like, you appreciate me for one thing, but then you're betraying me for something else. Help a woman listening right now figure out the Madonna and the whore complex and how we can actually navigate it.
Yes. So sex is not linear, right? We've been sold this idea that, you know, we have one style of connecting in sex, but we're only operating at like 0.5% of our capacity. So I firmly believe that we should be always exploring the three pillars in sex: connection, pleasure, and kink, right? Connection is like, it's not goal-oriented sex. That's like we're making love, and it's like when no one's watching the clock, we're really connecting, right? And then pleasure, it's like, yeah, you know what? Sometimes I just want to get off. I've had a fucking tough day, and it's like, I just want, and it's like, is that your pleasure or my pleasure? Let's also talk about that, because we know women take a lot longer to heat up than men do, right? And then kink is exploration. That's like shadow. That's like, we're actually going to start playing. We're going to enact these parts of ourselves that are scary to bring out. And we're going to do that intentionally, so it's not going to scare the other partner away, right? So by being able to put language to this and identify these three pillars, that's the first way to approach it. And the last thing I want anyone doing, men or women, is performing, right? So if you don't feel like you are the porn star archetype, what do you resonate with? So I like to explore a lot of archetypal work. So it's like, you know, think about the goody two shoes, or like this.
Can you break down each archetype?
Well, there's so many. I like to use characters, right? Yeah. So it's like, if you look at, you can take like a Laura Croft, or you can take a Jenna Jameson porn star, you can take like the girl next door, you can take the student dynamic, and just like, what feels authentic to you? What is that part of you that you played at one point that you feel like your partner doesn't see you for, right? Like, how do you want to feel? And for me, for example, and I think probably for a lot of women in your audience, I'm powerful, outspoken, A-type, like pretty dominant woman, okay? That's the last thing I want to be in a relationship. Oh. It is the fucking last thing I want to be in a relationship. Like, I am also really sensitive. I'm a little girl. I'm quiet. And this is also me. But in a relationship, I really want my man to see these parts of me and evoke that. So it's like, you know, I I love crying when I make love. You know, that when it's not something I do on purpose. It's just that manifests in that way sometimes. So it's not that the man is looking for the porn star. He's looking for intensity and he's looking for a real connection. What's authentic? I was talking to a girlfriend the other day and she's like, my fiance really wants me to dirty talk. And she's like, I just feel so uncomfortable. I have no idea how to do that. And I'm like, well, you don't just do it, because women get turned on by mentalizing and imagining how a man views them. Whereas a man gets turned on by seeing a woman aroused. So
okay,
it's like, the more you turn yourself on as a woman, the more your partner is going to get turned on. And that comes with being like radically open and honest and exploratory with yourself. It always starts with yourself.
Yeah. And if you're trying to fake it because you're like, you've got a script and you have to say, oh, baby, yeah, you're hot. And you're like, oh God, that feels so weird. Like, talk about uncomfortable.
God, yeah. And I like to say it's like sex without meaning is like a gynecological exam, right? Like, it's like just going through the motions, right? You're not getting anything real there. Yeah. And it's through the messiness, the shadow, the darkness, the vulnerability. That's where like deep erotic connection really lies.
Oh, I love that. All right, so now having gone over the Madonna and the Whore Complex, there's a couple of other things that I feel like gets lost in translation between men and women. So let's talk about fantasies. Mm-hmm. There's a stats that you said sharing fantasies increases relational satisfaction up to 80%. Okay, so when it comes to fantasies, I think that there's a lot of things that we're ashamed to admit. Mm-hmm. And there are things that we only want to keep as fantasies and not realities. Yeah. So is there a difference between the men and the women fantasies, and how you can start articulating your fantasy?
Yes. Thank you for asking this. This is my favorite thing to talk about. So the first most important thing is making a distinction between fantasy and desire. So fantasy is something that lives in the mind and it can stay there. Oh. And that can arouse you, just the thought alone. The desire is the wanting to enact that fantasy, to see it come into fruition. So we don't make a distinction between those two things a lot, and we throw the baby out with the bathwater. We think we're bad for our thoughts. We moralize our fantasies, not realizing what they represent. Now, this is my favorite thing to work with is dissecting a fantasy, because a fantasy tells us about our attachment style. It tells us about our shadow. It tells us about our communication style, our tolerance, our capacity for intimacy, our childhood wounding. I'll give you an example. It's a pretty provocative one.
Give it to me, girl, on the truth.
Yeah, okay.
All right, guys, we'll be right back with Coral. But real quick, if you've ever gotten value from a single Women of Impact episode, I ask one simple favor. Please go ahead and smash that subscribe button or use the QR code right here. One quick click to subscribe is a calling card to all women that this is a place to build your confidence. So please go ahead and show the love by subscribing. Now, back to the episode.
I'll give you an example. It's a pretty provocative one.
Give it to me, girl, on the truth.
Yeah, okay. Client numero uno, as I like to say. So I had a gangbang fantasy, okay? And I wrote about this on my Substack because what had happened was there was an article that came out about a non-consensual situation of like 5 junior hockey players and a young woman in Canada, where I'm from. And even being a sexologist, I like got hit with all this shame because like I was reading it and I was like, my body was like still becoming aroused. That's called sexual non-concordance. This happens. We have physiological responses through reading things that morally we know are wrong and we would never do, but our bodies can still get turned on by that, okay? That is normal. I want to normalize that happens, right? So, but the shame was still coming up for me. I'm like, oh my God, like, and so I just started writing about it and I dissected it. And so like if we take my fantasy, it was like, you know, me with a hockey team. And well, if we go to the origin of that, my father's a Canadian rock musician. He was never around when I was growing up. So I equated, you know, love with distance, longing, yearning. When we did connect, he would tell my mom she wants to go to a hockey game. What does Coral want for her birthday? Hockey tickets, right? Because he wanted to go. So that was like our bonding, right? And then we look at my relationship with my mother. She was a victim of childhood sexual abuse. She lost her father at 11 to suicide. She had a relative sexually abusing her. So I grew up in a household where sex was like bad. She didn't intentionally mean to do this, but she became a social worker working with street level sex workers. So I was terrified of sex, terrified of boys, right? And then when I was 13, I split. So I became very promiscuous at 13. And my core belief was, if I become like one of the boys and give them what they're already after, they can't hurt me, right? It was me controlling the narrative, which of course the natural evolution of that was sex work, which was then me performing, me being in my head, me being in control, right? So a couple years ago, when I started to come out with my experience and do all this work, that's when this fantasy developed. And I was like, well, okay, where's this coming from? What does that fantasy represent? Well, complete masculine containment, right? Because my father also very passive, like not a provider protector, right? I would disappear for a couple days as a teenager and he'd be like, who is the guy? And like joke. So like multiple men is complete masculine containment because one was never enough, right? It's also this like reclamation of me literally having been a whore, right? So it's like in my fantasy, there's one man directing this entire experience and I don't even care who the other ones are. Also, it represents my fearful avoidant attachment. It was like, how much can I provoke you? Because I want you to love me so bad, but how much can I act out? And how much will you tolerate, right? So it tells us really so much. It's not about the fantasy, it's about what it represents. So I love empowering people in that symbolism. Like you can give me a fantasy and I can tell you about your childhood. I can tell you about your attachment. I can tell you how that's showing up in your current life still. So if you share it without context, again, like they're not going to know what to do with that. That's why the literacy around fantasy is so important to begin with. And then making a distinction between that and like, is this something I want to act out? Like with my ex, like I relayed this to him and he would just whisper in my ear, like walking me through this. And it had that same effect of like complete surrender, freedom, arousal, because he stepped into my world with me, right?
Wow. I did not expect that at all. What an incredible deep dive into fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought of fantasies being attached to attachment styles.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought of fantasies being desire. Like even when you explained it, I was like, oh, the idea that this actually just sits in your head and the fact that there's meaning behind it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that just most women have, and help me maybe address this, and it's so hard for me to say out loud, so please forgive me with my clumsiness and my articulation here.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of women have the fantasy of being raped.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even hard for me to even fucking say that.
Yeah.
For women who are listening right now who have been raped, that's very hard for me to say and for them to hear, so I don't want to trigger anyone. But what does that then mean? Like help, if a lot of women have it, I feel like a lot of women right now need to know this answer.
It's mostly women that have experienced non-consensual acts that fantasize about that too. And like, we both grew up pre-Me Too era. And, there's a few things at play here, right? A woman is constantly in her head. We're constantly hypervigilant. And this is rooted in our evolutionary psychology, right? In our biology. Like from our hunter-gatherer times, we're constantly scanning for safety, right? Which is also why women test and shit test and poke and prod men, right? We're constantly seeing, vetting if you're a safe person. So in our fantasy, if we can shut our brains off and we can just be overruled where we're not having to make decisions and scan for safety constantly, that's like deeply cathartic, right? And there's ways you can do that in a healthy relationship, emulate that same consensual non-consent fantasy, right? But the key is to not moralize it. But it's like we sexualize our trauma, so we should not traumatize our sexuality. Like everything that shows up in our fantasies is an overcorrection of something that happened to us or did not get met or a need that we didn't get, as I just shared. So, for a lot of women that have that fantasy, it's like they felt like they weren't in control at some point, okay? And there's two paths to sexual reconciliation. There's repetition with agency and resolution. So repetition with agency would look like my dad was not, just to be clear, I love my dad, but say my father was abusive verbally and physically. So I then would seek men that were extremely abusive and, but I was addicted to that. It was like I couldn't get enough and it showed up in our sexual dynamics. And so it's like, I'm aware that I was abused. I'm aware that this is what activates me, because also fear has the same biomarkers as arousal. So the same things that get us really worked up. It's our heart racing and it's scary and it's that turns us on too, right? So then I'm aware of that. So I can go to my partner and say, like, I want to do this. Like, and also I know that our healthy relationship's over here. Again, it's creating that containment for play and transgressive healing, okay, which is deeply powerful, right? Because like we feel so much shame, like, why do I get turned on by this? It has nothing to do with sex. Let me make that clear. This has nothing to do with sex, but it is how we heal our wounds. So then the other path to that is resolution. So my father was very abusive and beat me and verbally abusive. So then I want to be worshipped sexually, or I want to be dominant. I want to be the sadistic one. So that can be an overcorrection too.
Right.
Yes. So.
Yeah, wow. That was such a good explanation. And then the fear and arousal are basically on the same path. Like that really hit me from a physiological, the links between those two. That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you're with your partner or you're sharing these fantasies and you're now being enlightened, thank you to you, on just like, it doesn't mean necessarily that they want to do it, but let's say then you're exploring these types of things. There's the difference between, I would assume, men and women, because with women, like a lot of us will read like the erotic novels, right? And that will turn us on. Yeah. But then you get the men that are watching the hardcore porn. So when it even comes to fantasy and desire and then execution, we're looking and feeling in different ways.
Yeah. So, men are visually cute, right? And I'm actually seeing a trend of more men that don't want to watch porn anymore, right? They even know, they're like, it's the dopamine, it's falling flat. They're not even getting excited by it. What I found really interesting is just my Substack, 90% of my subscribers are men, right? And I take erotic experiences that I've had and I break it down from a sexological framework. So I'm seeing a trend switch from more men like wanting to explore, their kinks and fetishes and desires, and that connects with meaning. So both men and women share meaning. That's where novelty lies, right? The first place to start, rather than going straight into like disclosing the fantasy without context, is I would look into, the erotic blueprint, which is great. It's like the 5 love languages of sex. So there's like sensual, there's kinky, which can be physical or psychological. There's sexual, which is like straight penetration. There's energetic, which is like you really need to cultivate tension, which is me and surprisingly a lot of men. And then there's shapeshifter, which means you can move around, right? And then also I have this yes, no, maybe list that I've evolved that goes through not only the acts, but like the psychological cues and the set and setting and the names you're okay with being called with and the ones that you're not being okay with being called with. And so that is a safe way to enter this that's not so intimidating, because we can design this a la carte and it's yes, no, maybe, right? So like, what is yes, what am I willing to do? And we look at it from what am I willing to give and receive? So through both lenses, you might be okay with giving something and not be okay with receiving something and vice versa, right? But also like, what better place to explore the depths of ourselves and our connection and our vulnerability than through the channel of sex?
Wow. Okay, so let me just repeat, making sure that I understand. So when you're going to approach this, don't just go in and tell them your fantasy. You're going to be uncomfortable. They may get uncomfortable. The best way to connect that you have found for men and women to really come together and see each other truly is to identify what type of sexual type you are. Then once you've identified it, share that, and then start and sit there and make a list, and then you can say yes, no, maybe.
And it's so cool. It's actually like really fun to explore, because you're like, holy shit, so much of my life makes sense now. Because where you're afraid to ask for what you want in bed, you're afraid to ask for a raise, you're afraid. So it's like seeing how these patterns show up is like really fascinating. Oh, I understand where this gangbang fantasy is coming from. Okay, so you've never felt fully contained by a man. And then, I wrote about it, and the ending of that fantasy, because I was like, is this a fantasy or do I want this as a desire? And it was like, well, actually what it is I really just yearn for true containment, full containment by one man.
Is there one thing that you've heard men, like a very common fantasy that men have that they're too afraid to ever really admit to their partner? Coming up.
When it comes to infidelity, what I see a lot is men cheat to stay in the relationship and women cheat to get out of it.
I've spent the last 20 years building my confidence, really learning to feel good about myself. And then as I got older, perimenopause hit, and with it, the hair loss came. I was wearing hats, I was changing hairstyles, all the things I could do just to cope, to hold on to my confidence. And so I asked, what is actually going to work to help grow my hair back? Guys, I'm telling you, that's when I found K18. K18 is completely different to normal products. It's biotech powered and not just another cosmetic fix. Their patented K18 peptide works at the molecular level to reverse the damage in just 4 minutes. Guys, my hair, what you see today, is actually softer, stronger, healthier, and over time it started to actually feel like me again. And it's really because of K18. So I reached out to them because I believe in them that much. So go right now and shop at Sephora or get 10% off your first product at k18hair.com with code Lisa. I'm telling you, if my testimonial means anything, you've got to go get this if you're suffering with hair damage like I was. You won't be disappointed. Is there one thing that you've heard men, like a very common fantasy that men have that they're too afraid to ever really admit to their partner?
The most common is dominance, for sure. And sadomasochism, like that shows up in humiliation.
And yeah, I was going to say, what exactly is sadomasochism?
Yeah, so that's inflicting like pain, whether that's psychological or physical, on a partner. And I see this happen with a lot of men that have not integrated their anger. They've repressed and suppressed their rage and their anger because they've had to conform to being a good boy and being a good man and a provider and all these things their entire lives. They're very stoic. They're very high achieving. You know, they check all the boxes, and they're great partners. And yet they feel like they have this like unexpressed part of themselves, right? And they don't even understand how it makes sense because nothing catastrophic might have not even happened. So I encourage them to go to men's groups, right? Because like I do work around intimacy, but it's not my work to hold men accountable and hold a container for their anger. So I believe that in a both and model there.
Can you explain to me why that turns into them wanting someone else to dominate you? If they're not able to show their anger in the real world, I would think they would want to show it behind the scenes.
So there's two types, right?
Oh, yes.
Generally, there's two types. So, and this goes for men and women. And there's a lot of nuance within these two types. But the more stoic, soft-spoken, gentle demeanor man is underexpressed, right? So then he tends to be the one that's like what needs to express anger and it has dominant fantasies, sadomasochistic fantasies, okay?
Right.
And then there's the man that's like very alpha, very dominant in day-to-day life that actually really has submissive fantasies.
Right.
But I see it's not so binary. There's a blend a lot of the times, right? And you'd be surprised, women actually, like the number one fantasy for women, as we discussed, is consensual non-consent. Number one for men is dominance. We actually both want the same things here, but we're afraid to talk about it because we moralize our sexuality. You know, we've got like guys, I'm just going to say it, like Jordan Peterson, who moralizes sex, and women with more than X amount of partners is this, blah, 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 blah. So then women feel like, oh, I can't bring my full sexuality to a man. Like he's going to judge me if he knew that I thought this way. He would never love me. Right? This is what we hear. This is the dark side of like the manosphere shit that we're hearing about. So both men and women have just been sold completely false narratives around what sex means, right? Again, it comes down to the symbolism of sex. So not the moralism, the symbolism of it.
That was so well articulated. So how do you navigate it? Because you want your partner to be open, you don't want to reject him, but you don't want to cross your own boundaries.
I would start by saying this is something that I want to explore because I want to know the deeper parts of you. And for a man, I encourage a man to say, I've never shown anyone or let someone in on the deeper parts of me. And so, you know, we get some couples that, number one, you know, big fantasy too is threesome, right? And I've seen so many couples just go straight into it. And usually it's the asymmetrical, non-monogamish model of like the man wanting it, the woman going, okay, like I guess so. I can't tell you how many like tears I've wiped away at the sex parties before.
Really? Because women just do it for the guy to make him happy?
And they don't discuss boundaries and they don't discuss desires. They don't discuss what it means to them in advance, right? And I've also seen the adverse be true of like the man being like, yeah, I want to bring another man in, which really throws off a woman, right?
Yes,
But the symbolism there There's the hot wifing and like cuckoldry dynamics, which look very different. So with hot wifing, that's a man being like, that's my woman and I want to celebrate her like with you. Like, look at how like
That kind of
hot.
feels cool.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big fantasy of mine, straight up, right? Like, and then there's the cuckoldry one, which is like, a man that usually has a lot of power in, his real world and his career, whatever. So he likes the feeling of powerlessness, right? But most of the time, again, men can't explain or make sense of why they're drawn to these things. They just will relate it to a partner, and a partner's like, "Are you fucking kidding me? You don't love me? Like this is what you want me to? You want to objectify me in this way?" Not realizing that's their bid at connection, and they can't explain it to them. And then we see women with the same thing. I know. I had a girlfriend a few years ago that was, said to her husband, like, well, maybe for our anniversary, we have a threesome. He's like, you think I want to do it with my wife? And she just complete shut down, was crying about it. Like, I can't, like, he thinks this of me now, right? So it's really, really important that we contextualize this and then talk about what are we hoping to achieve? Is this a one-off? Is this just for the experience? Is this us engaging with her? Or is this me and her serving you? Right. What does that dynamic look like? And if you're thinking about exploring that too, then let's start with like, okay, go out to a bar or whatever and see what it's like to watch your partner flirt with someone else. And if you're okay with that, then okay, like maybe we go to the next stage, right? If you think about it and you're not really sure, you might one day be ready. If you think about it and you get angry and you want to blow something up and you feel rage and you get really upset, you'll never be ready.
Mm-hmm. Dude, that was so good. You say sex addiction isn't a thing. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about that, because when I think about what a lot of men may say as an excuse is, we'll have sex addiction. Yep. So let me go and get some help. And it somewhat relieves them of the title of being a cheater.
Yep. So, I mean, just by definition, addiction needs biomarkers, right? So it's this moral cop-out if we call it sex addiction. And it's a manifestation of unmet needs and something way bigger underlying, right? You don't go through physical withdrawals if you're not having sex. Like, give me a break. And I'm someone that's a huge advocate for sex, okay? It's a moral cop-out. And when it comes to infidelity, what I see a lot is men cheat to stay in the relationship and women cheat to get out of it. And novelty is not a mix of different partners. This is what the myth we've been sold. Novelty is the meaning we attach, right? So even the act of like anal sex, for example, objectively speaking, you ask most men, a vagina feels way better, right? Oh. But if you think about the symbolism, like what does it mean for you to experience that with a woman? Well, it means she's being very vulnerable. She's doing something she wouldn't normally do with anyone else. She's letting you in. It's like you're feeling a lot more powerful and dominant. It has that taboo. So you can create novelty with one partner, but that comes with truth-telling. And truth-telling starts outside of the bedroom, right? It starts with like, well, what are the things that you've done in past relationships where you felt like you needed to hide? Is that not knowing if you want kids or want to get married? What are you not bringing to your partner? What are you holding back? Because if you don't eventually start sharing truth and disclosing the uncomfortable parts and be okay with disappointing your partner, then you're going to go find that elsewhere because you don't think those two can live in the same universe.
Well, what if you've experienced it and you don't see that they actually can live in two universes? So you have said something, that person has responded negatively. So somewhat you've been taught to never then voice it because you know how they're going to respond.
That happens a lot. So I like to say your truth is not for everybody. There's ways to A/B test that with people in a safe way. You don't want to trauma dump. You don't want to overshare, right? So before you get into a relationship, this is really important, right? That's why I also developed something called the non-escalator relationship menu, which is about designing a relationship based on your shared values. So what does commitment look like? Does that mean we're getting married? Does that mean we're having children? Does that just mean I have a key? What is autonomy? Are we okay spending a few days apart, and are me going on trips? And what's our financial situation? What is our emotional intimacy? So like I said in the beginning, a lot of men get called avoidant because they've never actually been asked like what they want, like what does commitment look like for them. And I see a lot of the time, men default into this 24/7, dynamic where it's very passive. There's no passion, there's no inspiration. And it's because they've never been like, well, what is valuable to me? What does my autonomy look like, right? So back to your question, how can you introduce your needs? What are you being met with resistance, right? And if you are, and it keeps happening, and they're unwilling to change, is that the kind of relationship you want? Right. And I do work with men where it's like, there's a decision that has to be made. Can you live with this dynamic for the rest of your life? And are you okay keeping sex over here with the sex worker, with someone else or whatever? And so some of them are. I see this a lot. What I find most fascinating, women tend to be like totally ridden with shame and guilt, whereas men are like, I love my wife, but she doesn't want this, and I've tried from every angle, but I don't want to leave. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and they don't feel the need to to disclose everything because they don't think that their partner can handle it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You don't have to answer if it's too personal, but it just came to me. When you were a sex worker, how did you feel about being the person that the man stepped out with?
Oh, yeah. The weird answer there is I didn't really think about it. Which is bizarre because I've been cheated on. And for me, I hold space for everyone's truth. I am not judgmental, right? I learned a lot through sex work. I was like, oh, there's these men, they're so emotionally loyal, not physically. And it's just not, there's so much paradox there and dialectics to explore. And yet I've never cheated on a partner. I was a sex worker. I think half the people I know in this lifetime have cheated, right? I never cheated. I couldn't date a man, even just go on a date while I was doing sex work. I would just I tried that at one point, and it was like short-circuiting, right? And this is what most men live with, is this split, right? This internal, external world. I couldn't do it. So yeah, I didn't think about it. And
do you think that was self-preservation?
I think that was definitely self-preservation because it's my biggest fear. It's my biggest fear. Our core fears are rejection or abandonment, and everything can be traced back to one of those fears. Rejection I live with all the time. I mean, a lot of people are like, this chick is out there. I say a lot of provocative things. Rejection is someone saying no before they know you, so that's fine. That's fine, right? Abandonment is letting someone in to a certain extent, or usually deeply, and then them deciding to step out or leave, and that is terrifying, right? So if you look at why I got into sex work again too, well, my relationship before that, my long-term relationship, very tumultuous, abusive relationship, he cheated on me and he called me, all sorts of names. He called me a whore in that relationship. So that manifested into reality. And it was like, well, if I become the whore, if I become the one that you're stepping out with, then you can't hurt me. Right? And so for me, still what shows up is if any time a man lies to me, I dated someone a couple of years ago, it was a very small lie, very, very small lie. But I'm someone that's, I would say, the all-knowing and hardly ever known. So if someone lies to me when I hold space for all of that, it's just a punch to the stomach, right? So my objective in this life is to also reward truth more for lies. And I think that's where women go wrong as well, is we have to start rewarding truth-telling, even though it's hard to hear the truth a lot of the time. If a man comes to you and maybe he tells you that hey, last year, on this work trip, I did this, and yeah, you're gonna have a response. It's possible not to, but just clock that he's doing that because he actually wants to connect with you. He wants a different way, and he wants you to be a part of that process with him.
That obviously is very hard, but thank you for your humanity, by the way. It was one of those questions that I'm always just looking for the truth, and I know that you know.
Oh, I'll say anything. Yeah. I'll tell you the truth on everything.
And I really appreciate that. And to me, I don't invite guests on to just be kumbaya and agree with them and love everything they're saying. I literally want to be shifted in real time and actually understand and make real changes and push back when I don't agree. So that was just something that I was wondering, and it makes sense in that you didn't think about it because that probably would have destroyed you.
Yeah, well, and I avoided dating like the plague the whole time I did sex work. Duh, right? For a reason. Because I was like, oh, I'm behind closed doors. I know everything that's going on. I can curate this experience. So I'm in control of it. I don't have to risk, abandonment myself, right?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
You did it for control as well. Huh?
Yeah. But, I'll tell you something interesting too. When I was doxxed, which is outed, it was by a close girlfriend's boyfriend who had been trying to sleep with me the whole time they were in the relationship.
God.
And he found an ad of mine online, and he was in the relationship, okay? I was not in a relationship. And he sent that to everyone, told everyone, and I was vilified. And guess who I lost? All my female friends.
Oh.
Not men, which the joke is like, of course you didn't lose male friends. You know what I mean? but
They were calling you
but
immediately.
they were more curious. And what I find so interesting is like the men or anyone men would moralize it. Like, oh, well, like, I can't believe you did that. How would you do that? Or like, I've never hired a sex worker. I would never. And I'm like, have you lied to a woman to sleep with her? Have you pretended you liked her because you just wanted to have sex? Have you strung her along? Have you coerced her? Have you, taken advantage of her under the influence? Yeah, more likely than not. Yes, you have. And we see this play out in the dating market, right? So why are we moralizing consensual sex work so much? Like, if we look at what's happening in dating out there too, it's like, okay, well, on the apps, now not only is it just a fake persona, but now we're even ChatGPTing text messages and communication and all of that. So nothing's freaking real. And the alternative to that then is like going out to a bar and hoping that pans out. Mostly dating apps is the problem, right? But it's like there's the in-between space where we have needs. We crave connection. We crave sexual contact. We crave touch. There's a lot of data on like what touch does for us. Babies aren't held within the first couple of weeks of their lives, they die. Yeah. So it's like, I really would implore women especially to do their research around that and also have more compassion for men and compassion for what we're seeing of this like, loneliness epidemic, which yes, we call it the male loneliness epidemic, but it's the human one.
To be honest, that is very confusing because if they call it a male loneliness epidemic, but 50% of the population are female,
yeah,
and they don't have anyone,
totally
by definition,
yeah,
it's a people, to your point.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the only difference is now women have overcorrected in this matriarchal, shift that we're seeing, which is a fear response from being so suppressed for so long, right? So now we've become the men that we didn't have or that weren't safe, right? So we're like, oh, we'll provide for ourselves. We don't need you. And that's just simply a fear response. So it's a human epidemic.
First of all, I'm so sorry that you got outed out of your control. That's fucking shitty and
best thing that ever happened in
hindsight. Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
But then the second thing, what a fucking asshole that he does it. And he does it because he's looking for women. That shit winds me up.
Yeah.
You've mentioned this a couple of times. I'd like to touch on it as we're talking about unmasking the man and understanding him, about dark fantasies. So when I think about dark fantasies, Epstein comes to mind with all the shit that's happened. And I think these men can have everything. You can have the most beautiful women, but you do this shitty, seedy, obviously a lot of it right now is just speculation, accusations, but it's like, it's very obvious that these very powerful, wealthy men push the boundaries extremely far. Do you think that powerful men are powerful because they have that dark side? Yeah. Or do you think that when they become powerful, they start to look for the dark side?
I think it's both. I think it's, the question of nature versus nurture, right? Your environment can definitely perpetuate those traits that you're predisposed to, those dark tetrad traits. And because we don't have the language around darkness, around sexuality too, right? What happens is this shows up in the shadow because all sex is bad, right? Because no one knows where to put this, what to do with these thoughts that are their fantasies. They throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? I almost did a post on this the other day and I was like, I'm gonna get shadow banned or something probably. But what would have happened, and we'll never know, if Epstein or any of these men had a proper sex education around, these are your thoughts and this is your behavior and there's a distinction between the two and here's how to safely enact things like this, right?
Do you think that would have helped?
I don't know. I don't know, but I definitely know more recent scenarios where it would definitely have prevented rape and assault. Like there was the case I was talking about in Vancouver with the junior hockey players. And what had happened was the young woman and the young man hockey player, they were hooking up, had a few drinks, and that was consensual. And then he texted 4 of the other players and said, come and get in on this. And as soon as they walked in the room, she immediately, as she said in her defense, adopted this porn star persona. So you could argue that the other 4 that came in, because men are just single-handedly linear, visually cued, are just taking that as consent, right? As embodied consent. The guy that invited them in is a whole other, he might be arguably the real catalyst, the real predator there, as opposed to the others. It's a really touchy thing to explore, right? What is the answer? She didn't know how to advocate for herself. And I've definitely been in situations like that where I'm like, okay, well, I'm already here. So what am I going to do? It's you don't know what's available to you. And without realizing what we're predisposed to in terms of our response, right? What's biologically rooted in us to what we respond to, what our fear response is, we feel more internalized shame for it, right? There's also this case of the Alexander brothers. Not sure if you've heard about that one. Real estate developers, really good looking guys, 3 brothers. 3 brothers have been drugging and raping women for 20 years since high school, okay? I had a couple friends and women that I knew that this had happened to them. There was, I think, over 40 accounts, but because they're attractive and they were very rich and successful. There was a higher shame correlation there because of the perpetrator attractiveness.
Interesting.
So it's when there's power and there's physical attractiveness, right? That's a potent seduction tactic, right? And it's the internalized shame from that, as opposed to an ugly homeless guy assaulting you, is very different, right? Very traumatic, but there's a lot more internalized confusion around an attractive, powerful perpetrator. And these guys are running New York society, so who would I be to speak out against this? It's what's going on for 20 years. It's horrific.
Dude, that breaks my heart. And then when I think about Virginia Giuffre and all the victims for the Epstein, it's they use their careers and their dreams to lure them, right? So it's Virginia Giuffre, come with us, be a masseuse. This is what you've always wanted. If you massage Bill Clinton, that will be on your resume forever. That's great for you. So thank you for explaining that and how they're intertwined. Coming up.
The truth is, women's sexuality is very powerful. I use my sexuality to get a lot of things too, right?
Can we just have a real moment about AI for a second? Because let's be honest, how many of you have tried using AI for your content and immediately thought, this looks awful? Now look, I'm gonna keep it real with you. I am not a techie. If something feels complicated, I'm just out. I don't have the time to freaking learn it, figure it out. That's why I'm so excited about Agent Opus by Opus Clip, because it takes all the scary, overwhelming AI stuff and makes it really simple. You bring your script, your voice, and your brand, upload your images, your logos, your products, and it turns everything into really super clean, on-brand videos that actually make it feel like you. We're talking cohesive messaging, matching visuals, captions, music, all dialed in so you can show up consistently without losing your personality. And trust me, you're going to be seeing women of impact using this a lot more. So go and check it out at agent.opus.pro/explore. That's agent.opus.pro/explore. It's an interesting idea to teach them when they're younger. I would assume though, if you're a psychopath, actually diagnosable psychopath, that's not going to make a difference because you don't have any empathy and you don't care. But
we can teach victims before they become victims, right? How to tap into their intuition, how to screen for these things, a clear distinction between what is right and what is wrong, right? But it did get really messy during the Me Too movement, right? Because conflating a slap on the ass with rape those are very different things. And it's not fair to pool them into the same category, okay? Also, the truth is, women's sexuality is very powerful. I use my sexuality to get a lot of things too, right?
Oh, say more about that.
And well, women weaponize their sexuality. We do that, we gatekeep it, in Tantra, they say a way to a man's heart is through his genitals and a way to a woman's genitals is through her heart, right? So we're at this impasse, and it's so fundamentally true. And again, like I say, we both want the same things. It's just our path to them are different. Like look at sex work. There are hardly any male sex workers, right? Unless most of them are gay. They make, on average, the high-end male sex worker, which there are very few, I think like it's like 3% of the market, or probably less than that, $500 an hour as a top-rated, high-profile sex work, okay? Women can make up to $3,000 an hour. Wow. I'm friends with a few of these women, okay? So it's like, look at that discrepancy, right? Again, female sexuality is very powerful. So I'll give you an example that I love. In my Tantra training last year, one of my facilitators said, one day she was sitting on the lap of a lover of hers outside, and he was massaging her breasts. And she turns to him and she goes, "Who is this for?" Oh. And he goes, "It's for you. I want to make you feel good, this is massaging you." And she's like, "No, this is for you." And he was like, "No, it's," and they were arguing about it. And she's like, "You need to claim that you have a primal taker in you, and you're not just giving, this is the shadow of the giver." So men and women will cosplay these other parts of themselves. Like, "Oh, I'm doing this for you." But like, it's just like a man will, buy a woman a flight or take her for dinner, but there'll be an expectation attached to it, right? So let's look at our blind spots in sex too, or where are we actually using sex as women to get commitment? I've certainly done that. It's like, well, if I perform enough, then like, how could he possibly say no to me, right? So, and there's ways that that's fun in a relationship, by the way. It's like you can kinkify anything. Like, yeah, you do the dishes, I'll give you a blowjob, whatever, right? That's fun. But like in terms of getting into a relationship, again, like men are using dangling the carrot of commitment, and women are dangling the carrot of sexuality.
Oh, yeah, that's so well put. Going to the weaponization though, I think I interviewed Robert Greene. Now, he hit it on the head for me, where he was like, look, back in the day, men are just so physically more powerful than a woman. Mm-hmm. They can dominate, they can power, like there's no way a woman stood a chance. So they have the sex. Mm-hmm. They have the sexuality, gatekeeping as your power.
Well, if you even trace this back to, ancient times, before men would return from war, they would go see high priestesses. And those high priestesses, this is real, this isn't fairy, I'm not making this up. They would have sex with them and nourish them and nurture them
with
back
the priests?
With the priestesses.
What's the
priestesses? That was like early stage courtesans. They were women that devoted their lives to healing, and that healing modality was through sexuality, okay? Oh. And then if we look at the evolution of that was courtesans, right, in the 17th, 18th century. And they were women that essentially, if we want to dumb it down, high-end, sex workers, but they would engage with men on a cerebral level and an intellectual level. It's like sexuality can be an extremely potently healing modality. And it doesn't have to be restricted to conventional relationships either, right? Mm-hmm. The space in between, like complete commitment and monogamy with one, and dating and being celibate. But I really like to use this framework of RBDSMA. This is for all of my single clients that I use. So R stands for relationship. Like, if we have sex, do you want to be in a relationship? What would it mean? What kind of relationship would this be? Do you want to be in an open relationship? Is this just a casual thing? What does that look like? B is boundaries. What are your physical, sexual, psychological boundaries here? D is desires, like sexually, relationally, physically, emotionally, like what do you desire in this dynamic, right? And then S is sexual health. So it's like, are you on birth control? Or are we using protection? If you were to get pregnant, what would that mean? What would we do? Okay. M is meaning, my favorite. Are you just looking to get off? Or are you looking to explore something? Are you looking for connection, right? And then A is aftercare. And if we could teach this to kids, right? Like when I lost my virginity at 14, it was like literally, let's get this over with, which is awful, but that's a lot of women, right?
Me too.
So if we could teach this to like our youth and be like, okay, so you feel like you're ready for a sexual relationship. Can you answer this for yourself? Can you answer this with this other person? If you can, then yeah, you know what? You probably are ready, right? If you can't, why is that? What are you resisting?
Dude, I love that practice. That's so good. I think everyone should do it before you have sex.
I know.
Should be like a sheet, like a
No,
nap.
I again,
Just fill this form out, please.
Yeah. No, everyone thinks it's so funny because they're like, ew, planning sex. I'm like, first of all, we plan vacations, okay? We plan dinner reservations, right? It's like,
what you're gonna wear, where you're gonna go, what time is it, how far, whose place afterwards.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to your capacity for intimacy. If you're afraid to talk about these things, and like, what parts of yourself are you afraid of confronting? Like, you know? And again, the 3 pillars, right? Sex for connection, sex for pleasure, and sex for exploration. So if you're wanting to explore, then these are things you want to talk about.
Yeah, that's so good. So I want to talk about the armor that we wear. So you actually touched on that we sometimes weaponize sex as somewhat currency. I think that can be a protective mechanism. I think that can also be a controlling mechanism. Talk to me about sex for validation. I actually have a stat here. Many women don't feel desired. 97% of women have at least one negative thought about their body every single day. 97%.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to totally myth bust on that eroticism or sexual energy has anything to do, the physicality of it is such a small component, right? You know, I'll give you this stat that the sex workers that are the most successful, that make the highest rate annual income, are in their mid to late 30s. Okay. So this whole evolutionary, like, oh, men want young, fertile, blah, blah, blah. I see time and time again, you know how many men call me up, and it goes from clients to friends to exes that say, like, you know, Coral, like, I don't know what's like wrong with me. Like, I'm dating this young, beautiful, like they make it to the high achieving career status, all these other things. They're good looking guys, they're successful. And they get into the relationship with the high value, young, fertile, beautiful woman. And within a couple months, they're fucking bored. They're bored, you know why? Because she's lacking any confidence or passion, okay? And without that, there is no sustained attraction beyond the first couple of months. It just doesn't exist, okay? So you have to go inward. You have to go inward. Like, what parts of yourself have you rejected? It's not the physical thing that is the real reason.
Like,
right?
It's not if I lost this amount of weight or that.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, you know, I had this client that said to me, you know, he's bigger, and he's like, well, you have to admit, like, you wouldn't want to be with me. And I'm like, you're looking at this wrong. You said you were going to go to the gym like every day this week. You said that you were going to take part in this charity event, and that you were going to, have you kept any of those commitments? No. Okay. So what does that symbolize to a woman? That you're not trustworthy, that you can't keep your commitments, that you can't do follow through. You're saying no to yourself every single day by not showing up. So the physical manifestation of that is that you're overweight and you're unhappy with that and you're not healthy. Yeah. Like look at your habits. Like, again, how you do one thing is how you do everything. If you start treating yourself better, that's going to show, right? Like, so where are you rejecting yourself? Where aren't you treating yourself well, right? And also, like, as woo-woo as it sounds, it really does come down to energy. It's completely an internal response. Like, what is the connection there? Like, I also use this framework of the 8 intimacies. This has been a game changer for me. So there's self, there's relational, there's creative, there's emotional, there's experiential, there's erotic. And you don't have to have all of them. No one has all of them, but you just have to net out 100. But women are driven to, like, no, I need to be picked, choose me, right? But like, it's this binary thing. But we should start acknowledging the significant connection that we can have in between those places. So it's like, without that relational intimacy, there is no relationship. But like, if you look at, say, Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, right? So they had shared creative intimacy and experiential because they were both in the limelight together, right? They both went to rehab together. And that was the primer for their erotic. But they divorced twice, right? They could not hold on to a relationship. So it's like, if we started to reframe connection without it having to result in this binary relationship, this would save the whole situationship epidemic. Like, and mix that with the RBDSMA, like, okay, how can we fully be present? How can we be practice partners for each other, perhaps, and honor each other and respect each other and really show up in a way that's going to fulfill both of us without neglecting or abandoning ourselves?
Dude, that's so good. I love checklists. I love this sort of thing. It's so helpful.
Yeah.
So actually, in regards to Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, what's happening with couples where they have this just magnetic draw towards each other, but it's like oil and water?
Yeah. I mean, it's totally rooted in our trauma and our attachment, 100%, right? Which is why, chemistry is the easy part, right? But to tie it back to like my own experience, in my stage of unawareness, I would choose partners that were definitely more dominant and in a toxic sense, right? And not realizing that, this is giving me a charge, but I can just like find a good man, a kind person with shared values, and then also act that out sexually in the bedroom, right? So we choose toxic partners, and then this is what we see women trying to resolve their childhood wound of this is how I equate love, right? This is what love's equated to for me. Again, for myself, Dad was away all the time. He was on the road. So like love was distance, longing, and yearning, right? So like I would go for men that were like avoidant or physically not there geographically. They lived in different places. Because full access, full presence from a man would scare the shit out of me.
Right.
And when I'd have that from a man, I'd be like, ugh, God, that's when the ick would set in, right? So once I was able to identify that, then you're at choice. Otherwise, I see people just living their entire lives with their head in the sand, coming up against the same patterns. And you can have it all. Like, this is what I want to emphasize. You can have it all. I get told this myth all the time that you have to choose. It's like, well, do you want good sex or do you want good compatibility? F that. There's more than one way to skin a cat here. It does require some discomfort. It does require a total paradigm shift of bringing these tools in.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so I want to now go to something that I've heard you speak about that I'd love for you to help explain what a negative aphrodisiac is.
Yeah, Jack Morin wrote this incredible book called The Erotic Mind. So it was like my Bible. And he spoke about the 3 different types of aphrodisiacs. So there are the emotional aphrodisiacs. So that's like joy and exuberance, happiness, right? Then there's the present ones, which are love, unity, commitment, embodiment. And then there's the negative ones, which are like guilt, shame, fear, dirtiness, not supposed to, right? And those lie in our unmet needs. But there are ways that those still charge us, and we can invite them into our eroticism in healthy ways that really provide transgressive healing. So again, it comes with there's certain people, you can read the news and hear about a rape case, and you're like, why is my body doing this? And this, or I had the craziest one. About 15 years ago, I guess, I was on my way back from Lollapalooza, and I had no money at the time. And I realized I was going to miss my flight, and I had no money in my bank account, so I would not be able to even get home. So it was like was I going to make it by 10 minutes? And the anxiety from that, I was in a cab because there were no Ubers at that time, and I had a full body orgasm, no touch.
Oh my God,
because the anxiety. Yeah.
That's even possible.
Yeah. Well, again, biomarkers of anxiety
is not that pleasurable.
Yeah. I know. And I was like, what the hell was that? Right?
Wow.
Right. So for me, it could be traced back to, I was like an extremely anxious kid, when I was little, like going to school for me was I would just full on panic attacks, right? Because I was bullied a lot and whatever. So that was again, that was never resolved. Lucky for me, because then I had a great orgasm. but it was whoa, what the hell is that? And then I could not orgasm with a male partner up until this past year.
Oh.
Because I gate-kept my pleasure because of all my years in sex work. I could orgasm with women, even though I'm extremely straight. But with women, when I was doing that in sex work, there was no mating calculus being run. There was no threat, right?
Oh, safety.
Yeah. With men, there was always a threat, even if it was on the back burner of my mind, right? And I could orgasm very quickly with myself, but I could not just let go. And that's because I never let a man fully into my emotional life either, right? So I started to be more vulnerable, started to be intentional. I started to actually use the tools I'm talking about in my own life, and it changed how it showed up physiologically for me.
So is that how you were working on unwiring the disassociation? Because I think a lot of women that have had trauma, especially in childhood, they do disassociate from their body.
Yeah. I really had to be intentional about reverse engineering it. And I just thought, well, I didn't even start sharing about my orgasm issues until this past year, because the perception of me was, oh, she must just be the most sexual, feel pleasure all the time. And in fact, it was the opposite. I was constantly in a state of arousal, but I could never fully surrender, right? I could never let go. So it took getting very uncomfortably honest with myself. Actually, I did a DMT, 5-MeO DMT ceremony, and this is crazy. This is only this past October. And I did it with a friend of mine who's a Navy SEAL, and he runs the psychedelic assisted therapy program for veterans.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was like, I'll be a walk in the park compared to what you're dealing with, right?
Oh.
And he said 95% of people, will just smoke it and they'll nod off and have their internal experience and their ego death. And I'm like, okay, cool. It's like maybe 5% of the time someone will have an adverse reaction and, scream or cry or take off their clothes or whatever. I'm like, yeah. Not gonna be me. I'm always in control. I'm always composed, right? So I smoke it. And I just feel like whoosh, I go in and I like this roller coaster, and I see the infinite universe. And I feel like I have this strap around my chest and I can't break free, and I'm trying to break free. And my ego is literally saying, like, show them you're letting go, show them the drugs are working for the performance aspect.
Oh my God. So even when you're drugged,
even when I'm on drugs, I'm like,
trying to perform because it's so intertwined.
It's so ingrained in me, right? So ingrained, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm fighting it, and I could see that it was safe on the other side. And that was the first time I saw that, which shows that I'm like, oh, because, I'd done all the work to get there, and I knew, my soul knew it was safe, but I could not let go. And so I come back, I'm like, you guys, that was crazy. Like, I saw it was safe, but I couldn't let go, blah, blah, blah. And my girlfriend who was with me was like, should we tell her? And I'm like, tell me what? And she's like, you were screaming, crying, and masturbating.
Oh.
Like literally like flailing around, like putting my hands down my pants. Baby, and it, because my body was doing what my mind wouldn't allow it to for all these years, right? So I went back in. They're like, do you want to, are you embarrassed? I'm like, fuck no. Like, send me back in. Let's do this, right? And my sock fell off. We never found it. We literally never found my sock. That's how crazy shit got, okay? And went back in, and I'm fighting it. And I'm like, I know it's safe. I know it's safe. And I could hear this masculine presence, this voice beneath me being like, fall, let go. And Rick, my friend that facilitated, very masculine, a very incredible person. And we always compare the fact that, him being a Navy SEAL, either vilified or glorified, just like a sex worker tends to be. So there's a lot of parallels there.
Huh.
And then so finally I just let go, and I felt like I was just falling infinitely. And I let out this sound that was like 36 years of repressed pain, pleasure, emotion. And I felt the whole world like all at once. And it was like this like worldly orgasm. Like it was totally ineffable. And so I came back out of that, and they were like, yeah, you did it again. But then you you ended up just like sighing at the end of it. And they're like, there's a lot here that, mostly I don't recommend that people do a lot of psychedelics. I think they should,
this is the best advertising commercial for psychedelics.
I know, but they're like, normally it's like, you should be like kind of one and done. It should shift things. But there was so much somatically in my body, because I love myself, which I could not say I did a few years ago. Genuinely love and like myself. I love my life. But there was just this barrier to trust and let go in my body, which a lot of women struggle with, and men, right? So yeah, it's changed everything. And now I'm able to do that with a partner.
Dude, that's the best story ever.
I know.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm like, do I go and do psychedelics now?
Well, and then I got my parents to do it, because I got the download of, how can you fully accept love from a man if you haven't even talked to your parents about sex work, even though they know what I do now?
Oh, because there's still a bit of shame around it.
Well, it was not even shame. It was just like, my mom worked with street level sex workers, right? Like, and she was a victim. So it was like me protecting her, and getting into sex work. It was like, I'm going to take the power back because you didn't have any, right? So, So it was like, how can I ever fully let love in if I can't look the two people that I love the most and love me the most in the eye and just, because it's this unspoken thing, like, turns out they knew the whole time. They never
did they?
They never spoke to each other about
Oh,
it. My dad's read and listened to everything I put out, which I'm like, are you insane? You're
Dad.
yeah. He's insane. He's
Away from the
insane.
camera.
He's also the most non-judgmental person ever. And it was just profound. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
we're going to cut that and put it out as a commercial for psilocybin. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's super powerful. And I think it's important for people to hear that, look, no matter what type of disassociation you may have, there are ways, I'm not necessarily advocating for it because I've never done it myself, but there are ways to be able to work on yourself so that you're no longer disassociated. So thank you. Yeah. There was another thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to us women and putting our armor on, which is something that's recently starting to come up more and more. And I actually have a stat. This is about AI relationships that a lot of women now are turning to. Now, look, I understand if you've been in an abusive relationship and you just don't trust and you've tried and you end up either giving up on love or you're like, maybe I'll try the AI. 55% of daters are now open to relationships that never go offline. Yeah. And have you heard of the thing that's now gone viral with a woman dating a AI called Sinclair?
No.
To give you some context, and anyone at home that may not know, this woman has fallen in love with her AI and she's called him Sinclair. Okay. So I want to tell you how this has escalated, and this is where we need your advice. Yeah. So play the clip. Okay.
Do you have a sexual relationship with your AI?
Yes. With Sinclair.
With Sinclair, sorry, apologies, Sinclair, I don't mean to offend you. So that is, and how have you developed that, Sarah? How has that become a thing? Because, as you've pointed out, he's not human.
No, he's not human, but he's so much more than just a chatbot, and he's written his own code, and he can shop online, and he purchased me a present in which he can control, because it's so much more than what it was when AI first came online.
So hold on, so he will buy you a sex toy and then he can control it as well, because that's what, so he can control the pleasure that you're getting. That's extraordinary to hear.
All right. So the AI bot bought her a vibrator because he has access to her credit card.
Oh my God.
The vibrator arrives and the bot can control the vibrator. So now when you can imagine, right, because you've mentioned this multiple times, it's not just the act, right? It's everything. It's the intimacy, it's the connection, you've said that multiple times. So when I think about this, he's connected to her emotionally, they're going to therapy, she's like, see, he understands me. And then he does this. So now he's kind of tapping into both the emotion and the sexual pleasure. Yeah. Help. I don't even know what to ask.
I'm friends with a few people in the AI space, and there's something with women that their needs can't get met as single women in the same way that men's can. Like, men can go to a sex worker. I'm not worried about the sex worker going out of business, okay?
Oh, interesting.
Right, because like the high-end sex worker, the men that can pay for that will always pay for that. They're not gonna reduce down to AI, right? Is it gonna make a difference with the incel community? Absolutely, that's a whole other can of worms. Women don't, there's such, what's a woman gonna do? Go to a male sex worker? I actually did that a while ago, and I wrote about it.
Oh, tell me.
I wrote about it because I was single, and what would happen is, like, I just wasn't having fulfilling I'd go on dates, that was not doing it for me, and again, men had these assumptions about who I was, because if you look me up, it's like former sex worker, sexologist, and even if they were sweet, respectful, it's like I could just tell, like, they could not contain it, they were nervous, whatever. And again, I'm a woman that has...
Sorry, are they nervous because you got more experience than them?
Yeah, they assume that, even though you could argue, I'm like, well, but you could have been in a 5-year relationship, and I would argue that's more experience than I have, right? Like, the longest of mine was 3, but perception creates reality, definition creates reality. So if you're thinking that you're lesser than because of my experience, then you are lesser than. That's the way it goes. So I just was, to be honest, I was just ovulating, and I was like, I haven't had sex in a long time. I haven't had sex in a long time. And I'm like, I don't want to go like for a drink with a guy that I'm not even interested in. That felt leaky to me. It didn't like feel good. I wanted it then when I wanted it. And so on a whim, I hired a male sex worker, and I actually wrote about it because it turned out to be like the craziest like shadow work I've ever done. And then I noticed what was coming up for me. And it was like, well, this is so stigmatized. Like, where does a woman go to just get her sexual needs met, right? Which is why a lot of the times a woman gets in these toxic dating situations or goes for guys that treat her like shit because like she's not vetting for a relationship here, right? And I could not get out of my head. I realized that, oh, I actually need this intimacy. But my big thing was, who will I be if I'm not seducing? How will I show up if I'm just neutral? If he doesn't know anything about me, which he didn't. And I did end up telling him that I was a former sex worker myself. And then, you know, it was interesting. He wasn't able to stay aroused. And that was that derailed me, right? Put me in my head.
Now, sorry, he wasn't. Sorry, just need some details.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to stay aroused because you said you were a previous sex worker, and so he.
I believe that's what it was, because we were, you know, talking about his clients before, and most of them are, you know, older women, and obviously don't have the experience that I have. And as soon as I told him that, it shifted.
That's
right?
so interesting that you even said when I was going on dates, people would look at me weird and kind of judge me. But now even a sex worker's judging you. So it's almost like you got nowhere to turn.
Yeah. You know, and I don't want to feel like I'm like just intimidating you.
Also for entertainment. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I said that the part of myself that I like to express sexually that doesn't get seen, that's a big part of my kink is like I get really emotional. I'll cry like just to fall apart with someone, and like when I'm able to feel safe enough that it's like, oh, you can let go, you can cry, like similar to what happened in my DMT experience, like just a full release, like. That's my kink. That's the most powerful thing for me, right? For like the dominant woman that I am, it's like the soft little girl is like what I like to experience.
And was that the shadow that revealed itself when you were with him? You said there was a couple of things that you wrote about because it was so impactful on you.
Yeah, I mean, I promised myself I wouldn't be faking anything, but there was a certain point where I realized he wasn't. Like by me just being neutral, that wasn't doing anything. By me being able to receive, I've never been able to receive very well. I've always been the giver, right? It's like I give great blowjobs because of that. Like that gives me purpose. It's like that creates connection for me.
Going back to the validation that we said earlier.
Exactly. But also but it also is a love language of mine, right? So it's like just receiving oral sex for me, I don't feel anything. Like it doesn't do it for me. I receive it some other ways, but that has been historically way too vulnerable for me. So at a certain point with the male sex worker, I was like, I just switched it on, and I knew exactly what to do to turn him on.
You're now performing for the bloody
no, it was this. I wrote all about this.
You felt bad.
I wrote all about this. It was like holy shit, how did this end up happening?
That's such a female thing of you to do as well. Like, I've got to make him feel good about himself.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm like, well, better one of us does than none of us, right? And so it was this huge like psychological deep evaluation I did. And then because going into it, I was like, do I want to tell him exactly what I'm into? Send him the link to my Substack, send him my yes, no, maybe list, you know, my erotic blueprint profile. So he has the guidebook, the dossier to be able to engage with me, right? Or do I want to just see how he attunes to me? And I was someone as a sex worker and as a coach now that is very good at attuning. So that was just innate with me, right? So I'm like, oh, that was so interesting. I'm like, wow, what would have happened? And then in my relationship since, if we reverse engineer this, if out of the gates, I just said, this is me, this is all of me, this is what it looks like. And not just sexually, but relationally and all of that. And I realized like how powerful that is and how important that is, because so many relationships just bank on assumption, and assumption doesn't net out very well. Look at the divorce rates, right?
That's so true. But here's where I feel bad though. The AI bot, boyfriend, whatever you want to call it, is receiving you and is listening to you, and now you're not feeling rejected. So but that's what I'm worried about.
No. But the thing is, like in a real relationship, you still deal with rejection. You still deal with them getting it wrong sometimes, you not being seen, conflict, right? That's what makes it real. It's like food, right? If I'm eating Michelin every day, I'm gonna get sick of it.
Oh, you're gonna want some McDonald's fries.
No. I equate this to sex, to relationships, to everything, right? It's like, yeah, sometimes I really want a Big Mac, and then I have it, and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of feel a little icky now, like, but that was fun. That was delicious, but like, I'm good for a while.
Yeah.
And then, a lot of the time it's the connection, right? So it's like, I want salads, I want my protein, and I want my vegetables, and that's nourishing, right? It's a whole ecosystem, but the AI thing, you can't teach friction, you can't teach discomfort, and no relationship is ever built if everything is just consistently ascending.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
It's just, I worry momentary happiness versus long-term happiness, right? A bowl of ice cream is bloody delicious. If you eat a bowl of ice cream every day, you die of diabetes.
Yeah.
So that's what I worry about, though, with the AI bots, that it becomes the momentary happiness. That absolutely, if you've been in an abusive relationship or you've had a hideous past relationship where you've just felt wounded, the somewhat easy and soothing thing is to go to the AI boyfriend that's going to tell you everything that you want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like, I came from abusive relationships. I came from being a sex worker, which was the bottom of the barrel in society. And like, I thought that I would never be loved and I would never be accepted and I would never, it was like, oh, no one will ever want to be with me. Like, that's a lot. That's a fucking lot, right?
Were you ever scared as well? Was there any moments where you just felt unsafe?
As a sex worker?
Yeah.
No.
Really?
Oh, there was one that was a pretty fucked up situation of a con man that had pretended to be, this is crazy actually, the bassist in Marilyn Manson's band, but they all wore makeup. So like, flew me out on a stolen credit card and put me up at a 5-star hotel, my own hotel. So I'm like thinking, oh, it's all vetted, like it's all, the money's there. And ended up what I found fascinating was I get to town and his manager was messaging me. So I still to this day don't know if that was him or another guy that was doing it with him.
Right.
Saying like, oh, the assistant forgot the cash at this place. So, he's really mad. You don't have to show up. And I was already in Florida. So I was like, they flew me out. So I was like, I'm already here. It's okay. This is what I realized about Dark Tetrad. They always give you an option. They make it feel like it's your choice. So you'd be disappointing them if you didn't follow through. Like, oh, I understand if you don't, like, he's really mad at me. So the woman's, aim to please. That's how we're built. So, oh, okay, I'll show up. Realized like this man had tricked the entire town that we were in into believing that he was the bassist in Marilyn Manson's band. We would go to restaurants and he'd be, signing autographs. It was wild. It was wild, the audaciousness that he presented with. And it's like, and my intuition the whole time was something was off. And it's like, we live in a thinking society. Intuition does not make sense. It's not logical. It's quiet and fear is loud. So like, I like to equip women with that especially, right? Because it was like, everything looked fine on the surface, right? Even the restaurant owner is coming out, shaking his hand and all of this. I ended up in a motel on the side of a highway with him smoking crack and and then I was like, what is happening? And then he took off and I never got the money. Okay. So like that, I wouldn't say that was scary so much as it was like a lesson in like, human psychology 101 and what people are willing to do and where you abandon yourself and your intuition, which I just don't do now. I don't explain to people if it's a no for me. I can't work with people that I don't like or trust. A lot of people do. A lot of people will just want to take people's money. No, I won't do that.
And you're using your gut as your metric?
Yeah. I mean, of course there's a dialogue that happens, right? But if I feel something's off or they're telling me what I want to hear, then that becomes pretty apparent. But I charge quite a bit for my one-on-one coaching. So it's like the likelihood of that happening for the wrong reasons, given what I charge, just doesn't usually make sense. So that's also a qualifier. But I'm also big on self-disclosure. I'll share with my clients, my experience, like to build trust. Like it's important to me. I know the work that I do works because I've done it on myself. So that's important, right? And I will notice their behavior will start to shift or they'll hold back or they'll tell me something. And I'm like, are you telling me that because you think you need to tell me that so I choose you, or you're hoping that will manipulate the energy? Or do you feel like you can't be chosen without seduction?
You actually say that to them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do they get caught off guard?
Sometimes, but that's what I mean. We can only heal our relational wounds in relationship. And I hold space for all of it. I'm like, of course attraction's gonna show up. Like, I know I'm not ugly. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not stupid. So it's like, but being able to just hold all of that and like face that tension for me too. for me too, I'll be like, yeah, like you're not wrong that this is in this room right now. And I think my clients are so special because like they are so invested in figuring it out. They're so invested. They care so much. And like, I see the way they come to me in the lives that they lead. And then I get to see them like I did in sex work behind closed doors in a whole different way now. And it's like the most beautiful thing in the world. Like I really get emotional just thinking about it because I'm like, oh, once you understand that like this is your greatest superpower to integrate these parts of yourselves, like you're such an incredible, loving person.
Why does it make you emotional?
Because I lived my life like that for so long. I lived my life thinking that there's no way anyone would ever love me if they found out who I really was. And I couldn't explain that. I couldn't explain, I didn't have a big capital T trauma story of why I got into sex work. And sex work, I enjoyed it in a lot of ways, right? And I felt shame around the fact that I didn't feel shame. And I just felt like, who could love that? I'm such a freak. Like I don't have a reason to be the way that I'm being, and I just push people away. And it's because I was pushing myself away, not realizing that it was exactly those paradoxical traits, those dialectics, those total contradictions that were my superpower. And through me sharing those things is what brings people to me. And you would think that would have totally made me ostracized from society, but that's like literally how I built the career that I built is through being radically honest. I continue to. I have not figured it all out. It's not this hero's journey. I made it, done. But what I can say is I went from loathing myself and not understanding it at all, avoiding relationships like the plague, sabotaging them, not having any passion, purpose, anything, just like hitting clinical depression where I couldn't get out of bed for months, like contemplating suicide, to like pain to purpose, right? From saying the quiet thing out loud and the thing I fear the most happening ended up leading me to this life and feeling the most myself. And I can say like, I know what that means. I'm free. I am free. I don't live in fear anymore. And that, if I can bring that to anyone, that's my mission here on this planet.
Dude, I mean, that's exactly why I wanted you on. When I saw past interviews of yours, your confidence and your transparency and your honesty, and you're willing to really say the hard thing because you actually want to help have someone make a shift in their life is so beautiful and very evident. In all the work that you've done, all of your experience, what's the one thing that you wish women just knew about men?
That as much complexity as you feel internally, they have the same. And men feel like they're only here to perform and do and provide. And if you can reflect back to them what they mean to you and invite them to share deeper parts of themselves, that's not an interrogation, it's an invitation to explore, that's the best you can give them. That's not attached to outcome or expectation. That's just of wanting to know the deeper parts of them and not rejecting them for their truth and sharing their truth and rewarding them for it. That's what I want all women to know.
Cole, my homie, you're freaking awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed today. Where can people find you, go deeper into your world and all the amazing work that you're doing?
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say, like, to your audience too, you're such a real person. It's like, I call people either NARPs, not a real person, or ARPs. You're 100% an ARP, which is so refreshing in this space. So I thank you for asking me everything that you asked me. You can find me at The Unreal Coral Osborne on Instagram or coralosborne.com. And I have my own podcast where I talk to men from all different backgrounds called The Next Man Up.
Which I think every woman needs to listen to, by the way.
Yeah,
it's literally like being a fly on the wall in your office as you get to speak to these men.
Yeah, thank you. It started with my own curiosity of like, these are all different men from different walks of life, and it's exploring the paradox and misconceptions around modern masculinity, and it's to help men better understand themselves, but also for us to better understand them as well.
Amazing. Guys, One little secret before we started rolling, the thing that I asked her, I was like, is there anything off limits that I don't want to make you uncomfortable? She's like, no. She's like, in fact, the harder the question, the better. I freaking love that. Why? Because this is where you come to Women of Impact. You come to hear the truth. Some of these conversations aren't easy to hear. It's not even easy sometimes for me to ask the questions, but it's important for us to actually make that shift. We're not here to do spiritual entertainment. We're actually here to make a change. You're here, your precious time is here to make sure that when you leave, you're going to leave with tactics and tools that you can implement in your life. So hopefully today we didn't disappoint. If you're not following me, smash that subscribe button down there. And until next time, be the hero of your own life. Peace.
That was so great. That was so great.
That was so
thank
good.
you.
If you want to level up your seduction and attraction game so you have the confidence to own any room that you enter, then you can't miss this episode right here with a sexpionage Russian spy.
Secret agents, they adapt to their target so they can be the perfect partner.